This is my 124 scale remote control rock crawler. It is awesome at climbing over all sorts of different obstacles, but what really fascinates me about this particular vehicle is the way its suspension is set up. If you see it as just the chassis, it actually has a 4-bar suspension mechanism. So each axle is held by 4 struts that are connected by ball joints to the main frame, and then that is independently connected by suspension. This allows it to climb over virtually anything it wants to. It's actually quite amazing. Each wheel can independently move up and down, but also the axles have 4-wheel drive and full steering capability. Of course, that means sometimes the SCX might get into situations where, you know, it probably doesn't belong, but that's okay. It can just drive right back out of it and no problem, it could live. So naturally, I thought this would be a really cool thing to take a look at in Gearblocks. And if we look at it a little bit closer, you can just see how much play the suspension has, and we can see those 4 bars connecting each axle, as well as an extendable drive shaft down the middle, which connects to the axle's gearbox and allows it to, you know, go. There's no differential on this system. It's just a fixed gear from top to bottom, but it does give you a perfectly symmetrical all-wheel drive on every wheel. Every wheel will spin at the same speed as the motor, no matter what. And of course, we can see how awesome that flexes on the suspension if we look at one wheel just sort of elevated on a roll of tape there. So really, really cool system. Of course, I thought this would be a wicked build to take into Gearblocks and try and make out of all the suspension pieces. So here we have my version of the SCX-24 chassis, but built in Gearblocks, and this is the coolest build I've ever done. It took me a while to figure it out. There's a thing called node bridging, which we can talk about in a later episode if you guys want, and that's how we have all these struts connected at weird angles. You can see if we get off and we actually look at this thing on the, I guess we'll call it the lift. It's just in frozen space. You can see like nodes aren't actually connected to these. They're all over the place and everything's sort of messed up. And it's kind of weird to build with it, but you can actually do a little bit of node bridging and you can have all those nodes connect. So now we have, you can see slanted axles with a sleeve that allows the axle to extend and retract as the suspension moves. That axle, of course, goes to a little bit of a drive gear, which then goes to a sloped gear that allows us to transmit the power to the axles. On the front here, you can see we've got a rack, which goes to these 2 custom hubs. And the hubs, of course, work. I'm just gonna freeze this because it's gonna move, but the hubs work in a really, really cool system. There's a CV joint right here, you can see, and the axle of that CV joint, the pivot point for that, is lined up with the rotation point of the axle above. Exactly how the SCX does it. It's really, really cool, and I'm super happy that this actually works. And then on the rear axle, of course, we've got the exact same thing. We've just got the 4 struts connecting to the frame of the axle, I guess, or axle connecting to frame. And then we've got our drive shaft down the middle, and then of course our independent suspension on the outside, our coilovers, and of course we've got this gear that transfers it down, and then that goes to just another, you know, 45-degree bevel gear, and that bevel gear, of course, feeds to a different bevel gear, which runs our straight axle. It's super cool. It's like, you can see even under, this is us torquing the engine, and under torque, it'll actually go. Now, there is one thing that happens. I think I've pushed the game physics a little far on this one. Sometimes the vehicle will just randomly explode. So what I had to actually do is all the struts, I removed part collision on them, which isn't a big deal because they don't collide with anything anyway. The rear axle seems to freak out, and as a result of that, it sometimes sends the vehicle off to oblivion, and I don't really know why. Really just an unfortunate thing, so I had to just kind of, you know, give the struts no collision, but again, doesn't affect anything. And like, look at the physics on this thing. As it torques from the engine, it actually will move the suspension. I had to add some weight to the top. That's what all those batteries, oh, there we go. But yeah, I had to add some weight to the top. That's what all the batteries are for, in order to make the suspension work as a crawler would. But you can see just a wicked, oh, come on now. Okay, maybe not as wicked. There we go. I had to give it a little bit of juice. But yeah, just a super cool chassis body. And you can see how it works just like the SCX does. Both wheels stay parallel to each other, front and back. Like the back wheels are always in parallel because they're connected to the same fixed axle. But you can see as it rolls over each individual object, the axles, you know, automatically sort of flex back and forth against those coilovers. And see, you can see on small bumps as well, it tries to keep the chassis as stabilized as it can. Although it's definitely much more effective on the larger bumps. This is hilarious. I really hope the dev, I know the dev's working hard on combustion engines. I believe that's what the last update said. But I really hope the dev adds more levels. I guess we could start making our own levels, actually, like this desert proving ground and stuff. You know, we could make our own proving ground scenarios. I haven't really gotten into the custom scenario thing, but there is a whole way to build your own custom scenario, like that go-kart track that the dev had made. But either way, this is just a super cool rock crawler. I know normally we build together in the videos, but with this Gearblocks video in particular, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to figure this out on camera. I'm gonna have to actually spend some time and work on the node bridging. And this is actually the second chassis that I had to build. The first one had some other issues, but it's so cool to have a proper crawler track and a proper crawler chassis. Like, look at this, there we go. Look at that, like right over. Like the front wheels are parallel, look at that. Look at the suspension flex on that, it's insane. The front wheels are still all four on the ground, like all parallel on the front, and then the back are parallel, but it just rolls over, not even a big deal. It's pretty cool. Let's take it into the hills as well. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I was just excited to actually try and build a RC car. So the node bridging is actually pretty cool. It lets us connect anything on any angle we want. And all we basically do is lock the one connection. You have to enable one of those advanced construction tools that the dev made, but it's all in the game, no problem. And like I said, if you guys want to see it, let me know in the comments down below. I can do a quick tutorial on it for those people who play Gearbox. It's not that complicated. You just have to watch out when you're building stuff, because you know, when you spawn this on the like frozen space, I guess, the nodes are all over the place. They're not necessarily lined up with where they're going to be in the final creation, which is sometimes I think what causes the axle to explode and spaz out. But it's just a super cool chassis. Like, this 4-bar system is just awesome. It allows your axles to roll. The coilovers are the only thing holding it up, so it's kind of cool, and everything's on ball joints. I don't actually know if this is used in real life as a proper. I feel like it would be maybe flimsy. It kind of has the same vibe as the fixed axle on the back of a trophy truck, but I thought they had an extra support strut in there that like would actually, like, I thought the whole axle was attached to a subframe piece that came off on the back. I'm not sure, I'd have to look into it, but I didn't think it was as like floaty as this. I feel like at high speeds this kind of system wouldn't necessarily be great, because you basically have 4 struts that are just all allowed to torque in any direction they want. I mean, we're torquing against the RPM of the motor, but you can see when it climbs hills, like, it's just so smooth over every bump. Are you serious? Or we not have the, okay, well, we don't have the power for that. I probably need to increase the RPM of the motor, and then, oh, yeah, no, we don't have the power for that either. Probably need to increase the RPM of the motor and then gear down the motor even further. Like, we could make this gear bigger, and then, but then we'd have to move more space here, or just make a bigger transfer case. Like right now, it's just a single transfer case that goes to the single axle, and then that single axle feeds both of the sub axles here with these CV joints, right? And then you can see here, we've got a cylinder sleeve, and basically what happens is it's fixed to this CV axle. This one's got extra space and it can extend in and out, which is exactly what the SCX has to do, because as it moves up and down in the suspension flexes, the axles do sort of change length a little bit. And then in between those axles, you know, they just go down to another CV joint. And then of course we've got all those connecting rods that really give us the stability and control. Yeah, almost binned it there. This thing is a really cool chassis though, and it's not gonna make it. All right, let me bring up the RPM just a little bit on this motor. I had it set to 500 because if this thing goes too fast, part of those physics problems I was talking about, the whole thing just sort of explodes. It's actually pretty good once you turn off some of the part collisions, but I think I was pushing the game with this one. But surprisingly, no lag once it spawned. It just sometimes had a tendency to yeet itself to oblivion and beyond, mainly because that axle decides to flail around, which is weird. I don't understand why. It's the same as the front axle. It's just a little bit longer on the rear, and for some reason the rear one likes to have a bit of a freak out, where the front one seems okay. But you can see it's such a cool chassis. I mean, look at the way it just rolls over every piece of terrain. Now, granted, my SCX in real life, you may have noticed, it has a little bit less suspension movement than this. The way the 4-bar's set up, I mean, scaled, maybe not, but like, it doesn't really have the same kind of wheel travel that this does. It has enough. Each wheel will probably move maybe about an inch in vertical travel, maybe an inch and a half. But in this, obviously, I kind of went a little bit bigger, and I decided to just sort of exaggerate it as much as possible and really just give it that, you know, that super cool off-roader chassis movement. But it's not race suspension spec in any ways. I do have RC drift cars that have much better suspension setups, and yeah, we might have to look at those at some point in time and see what they're all about. I also have a 128 trophy truck, so maybe we could look at its suspension as well, even though it's a tiny little thing. But really, really cool stuff. It's really cool that Gearblocks by default has all these functions like node bridging and lets you make these diagonal connections between parts. It's a 90-degree building grid, like everything is block coordinate based, but the dev still gives you the tools to make stuff that has these insane connection points that are at crazy angles and, you know, essentially lets you do whatever the heck you want to do. So I can't wait for combustion engines. Honestly, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what we can do with combustion engines and customize them, and then, you know, have cars with transmissions, clutches, you know, stall out engines if you're not doing stuff properly. You need proper brake systems. I mean, really, this dev is giving us all the tools to make the coolest custom cars that we ever possibly could. And of course, I can't drive. I think we'll try and spawn some custom objects. Look at that. I love that. That's so good. Let's see if we can spawn some custom objects, though. I've never actually tried to do this. I didn't put brakes on this thing. It does just brake with the motor, which is the way the SCX works in real life. But let's see. I think there's parts... Yeah, like concrete. I can spawn in concrete barriers. Okay. So if I do that, I can just clone this? Oh, this is sick. Okay, hold on a minute. I definitely hope the dev adds some objects like ramps and things like BeamNG has, you know? I mean, maybe we could make a custom ramp as an actual creation, but it would be really, really cool. We got ramps and barriers and that sort of thing. I know he's a solo dev, and you know, like solo devs, obviously lots of stuff to work on. Oh, there we go. It finally did the thing where it decided. See, this is another thing I love about this dev. He actually made it so that if your creation starts to freak out, like the physics gets out of control for whatever reason, like that little physics blip there was gonna yeet us to the stratosphere, but he actually wrote in a code where if the physics is about to explode, your creation just freezes in place and it says like, warning, your physics is going haywire. And like, that's super cool. You'll never lose a creation that way. It's fantastic. Oh, it just did it again. See, now it was fine, and now it's not having a good day. For some reason, I don't know why, that rear axle, I've replaced it like 17,000 times, and no matter what, for some reason, every time I replace it, it likes to do that and just freak out. And I'm not sure. We might have to respawn this guy. It's having a moment now, or maybe it's because I put too many concrete barriers. I find it funny too, because this is straight steering with CV joints, the steering doesn't like being steered. Like, it doesn't like turning at all. And the real SCX in real life has the same problem. It's got linear gears, and then it's got these little ball joint adapters with steering knuckles that basically allow the axle to swivel inside the steering knuckle, kind of like what I've set up here. And it's a real pain in the butt, because when you put the wheels at full lock, like this, and then you try and go forward, the CV joints have this extra force right at the steering knuckle on the all-wheel drive, which just makes it absolutely terrible. And because it's all straight gears, like the SCX, it kind of bobs when it tries to go around corners. It goes like, literally exactly what this is doing. It's amazing like how close Gearbox can get to the real-life RC stuff if you play around with the dimensions. But yeah, when you're at full steering lock and you try and turn, the axles have a bad day, and it's amazing to me that translated from both, you know, the real life version to the Gearblocks version. Now, I could get up this with the real life version, but I think I'm probably gonna need a little bit of a run-up ramp in this. Like, if we take one of these and just rotate it, whoops, rotate it this way, and put this one back in the line. Hey, there we go. All right, let's see if we can do this now. I think we can. It's got a nice little ramp into it. Yeah. It's so good. Like, it's so good. And then look, that wheel can drop and it can be on the ground. Like, look at that. That's so, I mean, there's a little bit of a hitbox thing with the tire, but that's so amazing. Man, I love rock crawlers. Rock crawlers and RC drift, those are the things for me. Like, drifting is great. I gotta still work on my crawler track. I have a drift track in my basement, which has actually changed. So I gotta do more, we gotta talk more about my drift track and my drift cars. A lot has changed since I made that last drift video on my channel. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I love the fact that Gearblocks lets me take RC and build it basically in the game. I mean, this is essentially an RC chassis, and you know, it just works. You can bring it into Gearblocks and it has the same sort of effects that it has in real life as it does in Gearblocks. I mean, it makes sense. We're using, you know, gears and ball joints and strut members and stuff, and even though it might not dimensionally be exact, it's still pretty good. And I love the rock crawling chassis. So maybe I'll work on a custom rock crawling course. We can make checkpoints and stuff, and I could put barriers, and we could make a course with checkpoints through the mountains up here and do something like that. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.